What the Speak, episode 21. Oh, my Lord, 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 Lord.
Do you kick ass when you speak, present, or pitch? If not, these expert discussions and insider tips can help you right now, today. Welcome to the What the Speak podcast. I'm your host, Brian Kelly.
Struggling with feeling comfortable in front of an audience when you present? Or maybe you're confident, but you have difficulty stumbling over filler words like and ah. Well, you can start kicking ass today by signing up for our weekly VIP updates. As a bonus, you'll also receive 11 free tips that will uncover 6 psychological secrets to public speaking, plus 5 tips on how to stop using filler words. Go to whatthespeak.com/VIP. John Lee Dumas, are you ready to answer the proverbial question, what the speak?
Absolutely.
All right. So John, briefly tell us about yourself and the topic that you present on.
So briefly about myself, Brian, first and foremost, thanks for having me on the show today. I'm excited to be here because I am just a country boy from the small town in Maine. I grew up there for the first 18 years of my life, went to college on a ROTC scholarship. And then I just spent the next 4 years in college training to become an officer, graduated at 22, was commissioned, and spent the next 8 years, 4 active, 4 in the reserves in the U.S. Army as an officer. And then tried a bunch of different things after that career. I was in commercial real estate, corporate finance, internet startups. I did it all before I finally settled on Entrepreneur on Fire, and that's where we sit.
Perfect. So how did you get into public speaking? What was kind of the first thing that you did? And maybe it's not just related to Entrepreneur on Fire, but going back, right. In your career.
So one thing as an officer, you always are public speaking. So I was doing it at a very young age. When I was 18 years old, during my college years, we were being trained as cadets, and that was always getting up in front of rooms and presenting missions, presenting different tactics and strategies. So I've always, since that age, been very comfortable with getting up in front of a room and presenting to it. And then while I was in the Army, I had to present to generals, colonels, majors very often on different tasks that we were doing, especially when I was deployed to Iraq. And then again, as a commercial real estate guy in corporate finance, whenever you have success, they want to emulate that success. So then you get up and you present in front of your coworkers to share with them what you're doing that's working. So it was really since the age of 18, building up as a presenter, as someone that was speaking publicly. And it really did culminate for me currently back in 2012 when I went down to New Media Expo by Blog World. It was my first real online conference that I attended as an attendee. And I was blown away by the speakers that were there. They were talking about the lifestyle by design businesses that they had created. And that really spurred me to launch Entrepreneur on Fire. And then just 6 months later, Brian, so in January of 2013, I was speaking at my first online conference, the same Blog World, but out in Vegas this time because I have it every 6 months. And so on that topic, and a topic that I've spoken on then, and then at every conference I've spoken at since, has been about podcasting, how to build an audience, utilizing podcasting as a vehicle, and the importance of adding value.
Perfect. Well, John, so it sounds like you've had some great experiences pulling together, essentially a talk in front of, like you said, generals, your fellow officers, etc. I would love to hear from you. What are some of the things, maybe one thing in particular that you've struggled with in regards to getting up in front of a group and speaking, and maybe how did you overcome it?
The biggest thing I struggled with was when I started speaking in front of large audiences was trying to memorize my speeches, like really trying to do a word for word. And then I'd get up and then somebody would cough or somebody would move and I would totally lose my train of thought. And then because I had memorized the entire speech and I couldn't get back there, I would really fuddle it up, so to speak. So when I learned that I really wanted to speak on more of a topic-based issue, just have a couple of key points that I knew I was going to expound upon on the fly and kind of ad lib, so to speak, then I became a much better public speaker because I no longer could really be distracted, and I no longer could get off pace because I didn't really have an exact script that I was following. I knew what topics I wanted to hit. I knew about what I wanted to talk about, but I was just kind of let the experience take control. And when that happens, it was a lot less preparation. There was a lot less stress and anxiety going into it. And it provided a lot better experience for the audience because I could then take questions that were happening throughout the presentation and kind of morph my speech that way. So that was the biggest thing I struggled with, was thinking I had to memorize every single word. And that was how I corrected that.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that a lot of people do because you feel comfortable with, okay, here's what I'm going to say. But as soon as you get off track, you're in deep water. So great. Well, John, let's go to the rapid fire Q&A round.
Right.
You ready?
Boom.
So what's the funniest thing that's happened to you when giving a presentation?
So one time I was giving a presentation and it was literally in front of thousands of people. It was in this huge conference area, this huge banquet area. And I don't really know if it was a seeing eye dog or somehow just a dog in general got loose within the banquet. And next thing I knew, there was this dog that was running up and down. And it was really distracting, obviously, everybody within the conference and myself as well. And finally, the owner or whoever was responsible for the dog was able to kind of corral it and drag the dog out of the banquet area. But it was definitely a disruption. And, if it was a situation where that had happened back when I was just memorizing speeches, it could have been disastrous because I would have had a hard time picking right back up from where I was left off. But luckily, I was at that point where I was more focused on the topic based. And so that's probably the funniest thing that's ever happened.
Perfect. Okay, what's your favorite go-to presentation tool or resource?
So presentation tool, I like to keep things pretty simple. I'm a big Keynote guy, and I've always utilized Keynote for all of my presentations. I definitely like to have there's actually an app also with an iPad that allows you to kind of have a teleprompter app, so to speak. So you can, when you're practicing your speech, and again, it was something I use all the time when I was memorizing to really try to get up there and memorize it. But now I still utilize it for just kind of timing and coming down for the different topics. So that really helps me pace my speech. So I know, okay, I talked about this topic and now it's kind of disappearing. So that means the next topic is time to come. And I can space out those topics. So a 45-minute speech will happen in 45 minutes instead of running in to the end and still having a couple things to talk about because I've let myself go on too long in one of the earlier chats.
Perfect. Okay, John, what is the most useful tip or trick that you've learned when presenting?
So the most useful tip or trick that I've learned is really going back to, looking, excuse me, not looking at the audience and realizing that, they're not hanging on to every single word that you're saying. They have their own thoughts. They're writing down certain things. They're distracted as well. So if you can just focus on the audience and realize that you want them to walk away with one or two key takeaways from that, then that's the big thing. You want to have a couple tweetables. You want to have a couple things that people are going to come up to you afterwards and say, John, this really resonated with me. So when I stopped really thinking that the audience was literally hanging on to every word and that every word I was going to say was like being imprinted on their minds, and instead really just focusing on one major takeaway that I was going to keep coming back to over and over again in the speech, I started having a lot more people come up to me after and say, John, this really resonated with me. John, this is something I want to share with my audience. And so coming back to that was really powerful. And I'm going to butcher this Maya Angelou quote, but it's something along the lines of, people will forget everything that you say. People will forget everything that you did. People will forget everything that you've talked about, but they'll never forget the way that you've made them feel. And so now when I'm up on stage, that's what I focus on, is how I'm going to make people feel during that so they can just walk away with, if nothing else, a good feeling.
Great. So John, how do you prepare for a presentation? What's the process that you go through?
So I really, again, focus on that feeling that I want the audience to walk away with, and also the theme that I really want to evoke in what I'm trying to present. So the last speech that I gave, I really wanted to talk to people. I really wanted people to walk away with the feeling and with the theme of building their audience, utilizing whatever vehicle they were most excited about, whether that be podcasting, blogging, video blogging, whatever that may be. I kept coming back to, listen, I really want you to walk away with this theme. I really want you to walk away with this feeling. And so I centered my entire speech around that and made each story that I told and made each example that I gave truly focused on people really being able to connect those dots, always back to building your audience and building that theme.
Perfect. So, John, the last question for you here is, what has the impact been on your business as a result of your speaking skills?
So it's truly been massive. And I don't just say that. My first real speaking engagement post launching Entrepreneur on Fire, which I launched in September of 2012, was just a few months later in January of 2013 when I gave that first speech at New Media Expo by Blog World, which I'm again speaking at this coming January out in Vegas. That took things to the next level because it really established me as a speaker. It really established myself as an online business that was doing some great things, and it legitimized what Entrepreneur on Fire was doing in front of thousands of people who were movers and shakers in the industry. So from that point forward, when I reached out to people to be interviewed on my podcast, Entrepreneur on Fire, and I can say, I would utilize a lot of social proof. One of those things saying, I was a headline speaker at New Media Expo by Blog World in 2013. And that just added to everything that I was presenting and making them think that it was definitely worth their time to spend 25 minutes with me on Skype sharing their journey. And since then, Entrepreneur on Fire has continued utilizing that momentum to where now, Brian, we're a top-ranked business podcast. We generate over 450,000 unique downloads every single month. We release income reports of Entrepreneur on Fire because we're very transparent and we really want people to see what's working for us and what's not working for us, what we're succeeding in and what we're failing in. And this has all been a result of building a massive audience that's been a huge part because of the different public speaking engagements that I've done, which is also continued to snowball down into social media marketing world in San Diego, content marketing world in Columbus, Agents of Change in Maine, going out to the Philippines to speak in March. So, it's really continued to snowball to build that resume, to build that media packet. And it's been invaluable for me and for my business.
So, John, what's one piece of advice that you wish you would have received when you first started speaking?
I wish I would have received just start. Like literally, I had an opportunity to speak at a couple smaller conferences before, but I didn't think that I was ready. And there's always going to be opportunities for anybody out there, whether it's at small meetups in your town, at different think tanks or different small business meetings, whatever they may be. There's meetups in every single town, in every single city, in every single state across America. And I wish that I had taken those opportunities first to really kind of cut my teeth, so to speak, in those in those smaller venues, so I could really see what was resonating with an entrepreneurial audience. Instead, I kind of learned the hard way, where I got up and I wasn't as direct, and I wasn't as focused as I know I should have been. Looking back on it now, and I could have avoided those mistakes and made them in a much smaller venue had I just started earlier. So that's one thing I would say. I would say to the listener today, just find a place that you can get up. Maybe it's Toastmasters. Maybe it's, a local Rotary Club where you can just get up and speak on something that you're passionate about and see how it resonates and ask for feedback. That's incredibly key. Ask for honest feedback from people that are there that are not just going to kind of blow wind in your sails, because that's not helpful. What is helpful is honest, constructive feedback.
All right, John. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Where can we connect with you online?
So my headquarters, Brian, is eofire.com. It's where everything happens. Our podcast show notes, our blog that we do multiple times per week. We have incredible resources for entrepreneurs, links to the podcast, which again is a top-ranked business podcast where we interview inspiring and successful entrepreneurs 7 days a week. So if anybody has time to stop by, I know they won't be disappointed.
Great. Well, thanks again, John.
Brian, thank you.
If you liked what today's guest had to share in our discussion, you may want to grab an audio copy of their latest book for free by going to WTSaudiobook.com. That's WTSaudiobook.com.
All right, here we go with the outro.
Thanks so much for joining us today on What to Speak. Be sure to visit whattospeak.com for show notes on every episode and to sign up for our email list to stay updated on resources that'll help you kick ass when you speak, present, or pitch.